Russ, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time, buddy. I just want to introduce you. We have today here Russ Bragg from City Interior. He was the flooring and CLT contractor on the 283 Greene Avenue job, which was an amazing project to be involved with, innovative to say the least. And I just want to take a little bit of time today with you, Russ, so you give us your take on the project. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your experience with this mass timber building.
Christian, thank you so much for having me. This is probably one of the most unique buildings that's ever happened in Brooklyn. First, given that it's all CLT based, I think that's the first of its kind. Most people are not familiar with these types of buildings, but my company's been around for about 20 years and we've done business in Montreal and in New York. So I know it's very common up in Montreal and I've seen them many times before. And when we got the opportunity to work on this project here in New York, we were very, very excited about it. Besides the flooring and having obviously your AcoustiTECH products in the flooring, which helped tremendously with the sound ratings, we were responsible for finishing all the ceilings, all the walls, all the exterior components of the CLT to make sure it's preserved and it stays preserved for years to come. We work very closely with CM & Associates, which is the general contractor of the project. They brought us on to give them, I guess, advice on the flooring and the CLT itself, because they know of our knowledge of the CLT product from Montreal. And eventually we won the bid, we got the job, and we shared our experience. We shared our knowledge on how to properly insulate it, how to properly install the flooring, how to install your products, which are, obviously fantastic when it comes to these style of buildings. And eventually, just everything kind of fell into place, and we're on board now. We're in the process of finishing the exterior parts of the CLT, making sure that doesn't weather and that doesn't turn. And hopefully that's going to stay preserved for years to come. And once the building is finished and accessible, we can obviously go in and take some good pictures of the walls, of the ceilings, and you'll see how everything looks and how everything looks when it's fresh and preserved after we finished it.
And talking about the floor, Russ, I mean, being that it's one of your expertise in what you do, I know it's the first time you working with our solutions, but how did you find, from a flooring contractor point of view, working in a mass timber building?
It's definitely a lot different than working with a concrete substrate, where the standard in New York is you have a concrete substrate, which is then, you glue some sort of a rubber substrate to that, and you glue the wood flooring on top of that, and everything's even and fine and dandy. Here, it's a little bit more work than that, because the CLT is wood. It breathes, it moves, it changes dimensions. In the transportation process from Canada to New York, the CLT gained moisture, it lost moisture. While it was being set up, it gained moisture, it lost moisture. It was exposed to the environment. So you got to understand that when you're installing on top of it, it's not as clean cut as it is installing on top of concrete. You got to deal with the bumps, the bruises, the CLT parts that are coming up or out or expanding, and you have to understand what you can do on top of it. Now, your products that we used on top of it were fantastic because they let the CLT be CLT. We didn't have to change the CLT too much because we had the right product to put on top of it, which allowed us to let the CLT breathe and expand and contract as it needs to. Now, some people don't know that they could do that, and rather, than just putting the right product, they just may slap a piece of plywood on top and call it a day. That's a solution. It's probably not the best one, but it's a solution. We're against doing that because the noise will travel through the CLT and down into the lower and adjoining, rooms and apartments, which is not what any architect or designer or developer wants, especially the developer, because then you're just going to have complaints from the tenants. The right thing to do is to use the right products and to do it right with the assumptions of letting the CLT be the CLT and noise transference with whatever product you're putting down.
Did you ever hear any comments from your crew, from the guys installing the Sofix or?
Well, it's very simple. Well, you know, the CLT had beams in certain spots, so we needed to make sure when we install the Sofix specifically that we avoid those beams, right? Because the beam sits 1/4 inch, 3/8 higher off the rest of the CLT. I prep my team that anytime we're installing the Sofix, make sure none of those balls, those blue balls, end up on the beam. They have to be off the beam at all times. And actually, the way your Sofix is installed, the distance in between the balls is slightly larger than the beam, which worked out fine. We followed that, and that's why we made sure all the CLT Sofix, the balls were at every entry point, because it was important that it doesn't dip any entry point or exit point or door or anything like that. The balls had to be lined up on the edge to make sure it doesn't dip when you step into the floor.
Yep.
Right? Because if you have a dead spot where you're coming in and out of somewhere, you're gonna feel it. But I made sure my teams were installing it, that we made sure there's balls at all exit points, exit and entry points, bathrooms, laundry rooms, bedrooms, entry to the apartment. That was important.
It showed in the results at the end of the day. Just FYI, on impact, we got a 54, an AIIC of 54. And on airborne, yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, I've been in some buildings in New York that are 8-inch slabs, and they're hitting 51, 52, which is still good because it passes code. But here we have a building that has no concrete, it has no suspended ceilings, nothing like that, and they're hitting 54.
I guess that makes sense.
The thing here is that when you're working on a wood construction like this one, Russ, it is almost mandatory to have some sort of suspended ceiling. Now, since here they didn't want a suspended ceiling, that's what the Sofix does. It actually creates kind of like the same effect of a ceiling, but on top. That's why you have all that fiber and you have those 2 layers of plywood. So that cavity becomes kind of like the replacement of your ceiling.
That makes sense.
So that's how you get a good result. And STC, we got 57. So 54 impact and 57 on STC.
Oh, that's a really good rating. It's very high.
It's awesome. That's awesome. And once you wrap your head around this being a different building, being a different animal than a concrete building, would you say, Russ, that it's similar when it comes to production time as any other project that you would do over concrete? Was it a little bit longer? What would you say on that?
I think because this being the first building and having the certain nuances that we had of it being the first, this might have taken a little bit longer. I think going forward, our installation time of the whole entire building, not just my trade, but all the trades together, should be 20 to 30% faster. The first, for any contractor, things require thought and patience and time before you just jump in and do what you need to do, which a lot of contractors like to do. They want to get in and get out. This wasn't that project. You have to take your time. You got to do things right. You got to do things correctly, precisely. You can't have mistakes because there's no going back from it. So I think the next building that's going to be coming up, which is also, I believe, a frame concept, will be a lot faster. It will go a lot smoother, and we're going to have a lot of ease from the local building department, who was, also responsible for some of the delays because they have never seen a structure like this. Even though this frame CLT structures exist all around the world for hundreds of years in Europe and for many years in Canada, it just hasn't taken effect in New York. And so people are very weary as to how to deal with it, how to assess it, how to approve it, and how to let contractors do what they need to do to make, to get this building finished.
It's a challenge sometimes, and I do remember those delays very vividly, and I wasn't too aware of why those delays were caused, but as in any new kind of building, something new always causes a lot of concerns. Moving forward, Russ, do you see yourself, or do you see mass timber being a thing more and more in Brooklyn or in New York or in your area where you are?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm not only a wood flooring contractor, I actually am a developer as well. And I develop smaller style buildings and multifamily homes. I'm actually sitting in one of my projects now, and I'm looking forward to locating another project and actually putting up some timber buildings of my own. I've been working on it with one of my own architects here in New Jersey, and we've identified some land, and we're working on the prices and valuations of building a CLT structure. Most likely, I'm going to build anywhere between 4 and 5 homes, somewhere in the next 6 months to a year and a half. So I'm looking into it. I think it's a cool concept. I think it's very modern. It's very environmentally friendly. I think it can be put together quicker than a regular structure. It's more like a puzzle pieces that just kind of connect, and boom, you have your existing structure. Things will turn around, and I think that will be a viable structure that people will follow. I definitely, in Brooklyn, it will be a hit no matter what. I know Fred, the developer there, has planned several structures in the same style, and I think he's going to do very well with it.
I was very interested in getting to know a little bit more about the challenges you faced and the the experience that you and your team had in this building, because from my point of view, it was obviously all about acoustics, all about soundproofing. And we needed somebody that was able to provide a good expertise when it came to the installation, because it was done tremendously well. Because we've seen some horror stories where whenever there's something that is not taken care of properly, acoustics go down and complaints start pouring in, and that's just bad news. From everybody that came into the building that I've talked about, whether it was the GC on site, which was Anthony, or the acoustical engineers that came in, they all said that the flooring was amazing. They all said, wow, I mean, you can't hear a thing. And obviously we have some involvement in there, but the installation says a lot. And this was my first time personally working with you, Russ, but I have nothing but positive things to say. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. Hopefully, we get things going on another building soon.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right, buddy. You take care.
Take it easy.